So we talked a little about players you can't read. Now let's talk about players you can. Hand reading is about 3 parts observation, 2 parts logic, and 1 part feel. It's not a magical process. Observe your opponent's tendencies and then use your deductive reasoning skills. Here are a few insights. One warning is that many of these insights are generalities. They don't apply to every player. Players can play any way they want, and some people play very strangely, very randomly. Some people check and call every hand. Some people raise every hand. First principle is that bets don't necessarily mean a lot, but raises usually mean a lot more. That is, people usually bet with all kinds of hands. Bluffs, straight draws, flush draws, pairs, top pair, or bottom pair. But when people raise, usually they mean business. Generally, typical players don't raise often enough. They bet roughly enough, but they don't raise nearly often enough. So when people bet, it doesn't necessarily tell you that they have a good hand, but when they raise, often it does. Here's an example of how to use that. So in this example, we're watching someone play, and he has ace-6 offsuit in the big blind, ace of clubs, 6 of diamonds. He happens to be a typical player who's not very good, and who plays according to our principle. 2 players limp. You're next with pocket 7s, 7 of spades, 7 of clubs. You call. Everybody folds to the big blind, your checks. Flop comes 9, 6 deuce rainbow. 9 of hearts, 6 of clubs, 2 of diamonds. So notice that the player in the big blind flopped middle pair, 6s, with an ace kicker. But you still haven't beaten with pocket 7s. Usually, a typical big blind will either bet or will check and call. Very few typical players would check raise with this hand. Now, in fact, it's often right to check raise with middle pair, but most players would never do it. So you can use the way your opponent plays his hand to try to figure out what he has. If he checks to you, you bet, and he calls, your pocket 7s are likely to be good, because he might well have raised if he had a 9. If your opponent bets, you're slightly less likely to have the best hand, because he might have a 9. But remember, people bet with all sorts of hands. He might have a 6 or a deuce, a smaller pocket pair, or even like ace high, ace 10 that missed, but he thinks the flop was ragged and he wants to take a shot at it. So when your opponent bets, your pocket 7s still look pretty good. However, if it checks to you, you bet, and he raises, you're in trouble. He almost certainly has at least a 9, and you're probably drawn to 2 outs. So you can use how your opponent plays to figure out how good your hand is and whether it's worth playing or not.